Okay, friends, it's time for Chapter 10, Bird on Strike. When we got home, Grandma told us Uncle Feather hadn't said a word since we left. I'm worried, Grandma said. He could have a sore throat. Uncle Feather's fine, Fudge told her. He'll talk tonight. How do you know? I asked. I know my bird, Pete. Fudge pulled a chair over to the kitchen counter, stood on it, climbed up, opened the cupboard, and pulled out a package of rice cakes. Don't spoil your appetite, Grandma said. I've made you a nice supper. Couscous and Moroccan chicken? Not that I had to ask. Just catching whiffs from the oven was enough to make my mouth water. Grandma nodded. And Buzzy's coming up to join us. Great, I said. Grandma and Buzzy Sr. met over the summer in Maine. And as Mom likes to say, one thing led to another. They were married at the end of August. I really like Buzzy Sr. The only problem, and it's a big one, is he's Sheila Tubman's grandfather. The idea that I could be Sheila Tubman's step-something is revolting. Sheila's coming too, Grandma said. I groaned. Now, Peter, Grandma began. I didn't wait for her to finish. Come on, Grandma, you knew about Sheila and me before you married Buzzy. That doesn't mean you two can't be civil to one another. What's civil? Fudge asked, climbing onto Grandma's lap with his rice cake. Grandma stroked his hair. It means not being rude, she told him, looking right at me. Fine, I said, I'll be civil. It could even mean being pleasant and respectful, Grandma added. I'm pleasant and respectful, Fudge said, munching away, right? Oh yeah, I told him. You're the most pleasant and respectful person ever. He laughed, and when he did, half of the chewed-up rice cake inside his mouth wound up on the floor. Turtle lapped it up like it was the world's best treat. Grandma suggested Fudge try to keep his food in his mouth, but Fudge told her, Turtle loves chewed-up food, look. And he let another mouthful go. That's enough, Fudge, Grandma said. Finish your rice cake, then tell me all about Washington. You mean Fudgington? He asked. That's when I took off for my room. Turtle padded down the hall after me. I stopped to have a look at Uncle Feather. How's it going? I asked, standing right in front of his cage. He looked at me, but he didn't say anything. So I said, Bonjour, stupid. That's one of his favorite expressions. Once you get him started on that one, forget it. You can't turn him off. But this time, instead of repeating it over and over, he scratched his head with his foot. What's your problem? I asked. Did you miss us? Is that it? Were you lonely? He picked up a rattle with his foot and shook it. He loves Tootsie's baby toys, but he still didn't say anything. So I tried some of his favorite words, the really bad ones, the ones Mom's calls thoroughly inappropriate. Turtle sat up, waiting, but Uncle Feather just yawned, like he was bored or tired. Either way, he had nothing to say. I thought, maybe he does have a sore throat. Maybe he has laryngitis. Half an hour later, when Sheila came in with Buzzy Sr., she said, Did Muriel tell you about your bird, Fudge? What about my bird? He hasn't said a word since you left. I was up here yesterday and again this morning, and he wouldn't speak at all. He'll talk tonight, Fudge said. I'd like to know how you can be so sure of that, I said. I know my bird, Pete, he said for the second time. Well, I hope you're right, Sheila said. Then she asked, So how was Washington? You mean Fudgington? Fudge said. Sheila shook her head in disgust. Muriel, she said, you have to do something about your youngest grandson. He thinks the world revolves around him. The world revolves around the sun, Fudge said. I learned that at the planetarium. She just shook her head again. That night, while I was on my bed reading, I heard Fudge talking to Uncle Feather. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the monsters bite. And Uncle Feather answering, Good night, sleep tight, bite, bite, bite. I went into Fudge's room to see Uncle Feather for myself, but Fudge had already covered his cage. Shush, Pete, Fudge said. He's sleeping now. Fudge was snuggled up with his bag of shredded money. The next day, it was the same thing. Uncle Feather wouldn't talk to any of us, but Fudge said, Don't worry, he'll talk tonight. Just as Fudge promised, that night I heard him talking to his bird. Everybody's worried about you, Uncle Feather, but you're fine, aren't you? You're a fine birdie. Fine birdie, just fine, birdie, birdie, Fudge laughed. The next day, when Uncle Feather still wouldn't talk to me or Mom or Dad, I asked Fudge, How come he only talks to you? Because I'm his favorite. Okay, let's say that's true. That still doesn't explain why he'll only talk at night. Who can explain it? Who can tell you why? Fudge sang. That's a line from a song Buzzy sings to Grandma. Try, I told him. Try what, Pete? Try and explain why Uncle Feather only talks at night. I can't, Pete. How long has it been since he's only talked at night? Since I could tell he was stalling. I'm listening, I told him. I know you are, Pete. Well, he only talks at night since Richie Potter was here for a play date. What's Richie Potter got to do with it? Fudge shrugged. That's a pretty weird story, Fudge. Yeah, well, weird stories happen, Pete. I shook my head. I didn't believe him for a minute, not 1 minute. I knew him too well. He was hiding something. So that night, I waited outside his bedroom door. Since he's afraid of monsters, he never closes it all the way. He's got nightlights plugged into every outlet in his room. And before he gets into bed, he sprays the whole place with monster spray, which is nothing but scented water in a bottle with a fancy label. But he believes in it, so I promise Mom and Dad I'll never tell. This time when Fudge sang, "Good night, sleep tight," I crept into his room. I could see him on his bed thumbing through one of his catalogs. "Good night, sleep tight," he sang again. "Don't let the monsters bite." "Good night, sleep tight," came the reply. Only it wasn't coming from Uncle Feather. It was coming from my brother. "Aha!" I called, jumping onto his bed. "Gotcha!" Fudge screamed. I guess I really scared him because then he started bawling. Dad came running into Fudge's room, followed by Mom. She picked Fudge up. He clung to her. "What's wrong, Fudgy? Tell Mommy. Where does it hurt?" "You want to know what's wrong?" I said. "I'll tell you." "No, Pete!" Fudge screamed through his tears. "No!" Mom and Dad looked puzzled. "What's all this about?" Dad asked. "I'll tell you what it's about," I said, whipping the cover off Uncle Fudge's cage. "Uncle Feather's lost his voice, and Fudge has been talking for him. I caught him in the act." "What?" Mom said. "Your younger son is a good mimic," I said. "He almost got away with it." "How long has this been going on?" Dad asked. I half expected Uncle Feather to answer. "It's been going on for weeks now. It's about time you noticed." "Peter," Dad began. "Don't ask me," I said. "Ask Bird Boy." "Fudge," Dad said. Fudge buried his face in Mom's neck, slobbering all over her. "How long has it been since Uncle Feather talked?" Dad asked. Since, Fudge sobbed. "Since Richie Potter's first play date." His face was a mess of snot and saliva. "But that was weeks ago," Mom said. I gave him my best marble, the green one, and..." "You gave Richie Potter your best marble," Mom said. "That was very generous of you." "No," Fudge cried. "I gave it to Uncle Feather. I put it in his cage, and he swallowed it, and now he can't talk." That unleashed another round of sobbing. "You fed Uncle Feather a marble?" I asked. "I didn't feed him, Pete. I gave it to him to play with. I didn't know he was going to swallow it and stop talking." Wait a minute, I said. "How can Uncle Feather swallow a marble? I mean, look at the size of him."